Ever stumble upon a story that just makes you stop and think, wait, what?
Oh, definitely.
That's sort of how we felt diving into the tale of this certain tree down in Athens, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
A tree that, believe it or not, is said to own itself.
It's a truly unique narrative, isn't it? This white oak, standing at the corner of Deering and Findlay, it has this almost legendary status.
Right.
For this deep dive, we've gathered some fascinating material, news reports going back over a century, historical accounts trying to trace the story's origins,
Okay.
and even some really interesting academic takes that explore what this whole thing might well signify.
Exactly. Our goal today is to really get to the heart of it. We want to understand the story behind this singular landmark.
Yeah.
Dig into the questions it raises about ownership. I mean, can a tree actually own anything?
That's the big question.
And ultimately figure out why this seemingly simple story continues to capture our collective imagination. Okay, so where does this remarkable story even begin?
Well, the story revolves around a man named Colonel William H. Jackson. He came from a pretty prominent Georgia family. His father was a governor.
Ah.
And the tale goes that sometime in the early 1800s, say between 1820 and 1832, Colonel Jackson was apparently so fond of a particular white oak on his property that he decided to take a rather unusual step.
And that unusual step was supposedly drafting a will that gave the tree ownership of itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just the tree, but the ground with an 8-foot circle around its trunk.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite a gesture of appreciation.
That's the core of the legend, yeah. Interestingly, the earliest written evidence we have of this supposed deed doesn't pop up until much later.
Oh, when was that?
It's in an article from the Athens Weekly Banner on August 12, 1890. The title itself is pretty suggestive. Deeded to itself.
Huh. A headline that definitely makes you want to read more. Sure. And this article apparently even quoted a portion of this legendary deed. What exactly did it say?
According to that newspaper, the Athens Weekly Banner, the purported deed granted the tree entire possession of itself and all land within 8 feet of the trunk.
Huh. Entire possession of itself.
A pretty straightforward statement that really forms the basis of this whole enduring story of self-ownership.
So this grand old tree stood there for decades, seemingly the proud owner of its little patch of Georgia soil.
Yeah.
But like all living things, time eventually takes its toll.
Right.
And here's where things take an interesting turn. What ultimately happened to the original owner itself?
Sadly, yeah. The original white oak eventually succumbed. October 9th, 1942, after a period of decline, it fell during a strong windstorm.
Oh, wow.
Some accounts even suggest root rot might have been involved. It was quite an old tree. Estimates range from 150 to maybe even 400 years old.
Goodness.
And over 100 feet tall, a real landmark.
You can just imagine the community's reaction to losing such an old and, well, significant tree. But the story doesn't end there, does it?
No, not at all.
It's like its spirit lived on, quite literally, in its offspring.
Precisely. The legend of the tree that owns itself was so deeply rooted in the local mind that the Junior Ladies Garden Club of Athens took action. They wanted to ensure it continued.
What do they do?
They gathered acorns from the original tree, the fallen one, with the specific intention of growing a successor.
That's a wonderful example of community spirit, really. So these acorns were carefully tended, and a new generation was intentionally planted.
Yes. On December 4th, 1946, under the guidance of Professor Roy Bowden, a sapling grown from one of those original acorns was planted right in the exact same spot.
Huh. The same location.
Mm-hmm. And the second-generation white oak, it's now about 70 feet tall, is also regarded by local tradition as owning itself.
Yeah.
People often just call it the tree that owns itself. It carries on that unique inheritance.
It's a really touching continuation of the story. But this brings us back to that fundamental question, doesn't it? This idea of ownership.
Right.
Is it like a legal fact, or is it more of a cherished local belief? Something sentimental?
That's the critical point when you start digging into the evidence. And the findings, well, they strongly suggest one conclusion.
Which is?
Despite really thorough searches going back decades, no legally binding deed transferring ownership to the tree has ever been found in the official Clark County records.
Never.
Never. And these searches go way back, well before Colonel Jackson's death in 1876.
So the actual document, the legal instrument that the whole legend is built on, it just seems to be missing.
It appears so, yeah. That's a pretty big gap in the story.
It is.
And the inconsistencies don't stop there. Further digging indicates that Colonel Jackson never actually owned the specific piece of land where the tree stood, at least not during that 1820, 1832 timeframe.
Wait, really?
Yeah, property records show the land was sold to a university professor, Malthus A. Ward, back in 1832.
So how could he deed land he didn't own to the tree?
Exactly. It raises serious questions about the whole basis of the legend, legally speaking.
That definitely throws a wrench in the legal works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So if there was no legal transfer, how did this narrative get so widespread?
Well, there's a pretty compelling theory that the 1890 newspaper article, The Deeded to Itself one, played a really key role. Maybe intentionally.
How so?
Some speculate it was a kind of early clickbait, a 19th century way to pose a thought-provoking question. Could a non-sentient entity, like a tree, legally own property?
Ah, okay.
The article itself actually opens by posing that very question.
A 19th century philosophical question going viral through print. An interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
But from a legal standpoint today, where does Georgia law stand on this?
Well, under Georgia state law, it's pretty clear. To inherit or own property, you need the legal capacity to accept it.
Right.
And trees, well, they just don't have that. You need to be recognized as a legal entity, like a person or a corporation.
So even if that original deed had existed and been found,
It likely wouldn't have held up in court. That's the generally accepted legal view. And this is kind of backed up by the fact that the city of Athens itself, the government, doesn't legally recognize the tree as owning itself.
so who does own the land it's on, officially?
Officially, the land where the tree is situated is part of the property at 125 Deering Street, and that's currently owned or managed by a trust.
A trust. Who's involved with that?
The trustees are Hubert and Patricia McAlexander. Interestingly, they're former English department professors at the University of Georgia.
Oh, okay.
They got the property in '96 and later set up the trust.
So in the eyes of the law and property records, the tree is just part of the land owned by this trust. But there's another interesting twist here about the local government itself, isn't there?
Yes, there is. If you look at the plat maps the tax assessors use,
Yeah.
the tree's location is actually considered part of the public roads right of way.
Get out. So technically,
This would mean the land is owned by the municipality, the Athens-Clarke County Unified Government.
wow. So not only does the tree probably not legally own itself, but it might not even be on the private land it's usually associated with. That's quite a twist.
It is. But, despite this lack of legal basis for self-ownership, the Athens-Clarke County government totally acknowledges the strong public feeling about the tree.
So what do?
They essentially treat it as a public street tree and maintain it. They respect the sentiment.
So they're respecting the spirit of the legend, even if the legal reality is different. That seems like a good compromise. And didn't you say some prominent local figure helped solidify this legend?
Absolutely. Back in 1906, there was renewed interest. The original 1890 story got reprinted in the Athens Banner newspaper.
Okay.
And George Foster Peabody, really well-known philanthropist, stepped in. He actually funded the installation of a marble marker and a granite post right there at the site.
And what did they say?
Both explicitly stated that the tree owned itself. That act, putting up physical markers, undoubtedly helped cement the legend in the public mind.
So even without the legal papers, these markers and the ongoing local belief keep this story very much alive. It makes you wonder, why does this particular story have such staying power? What is it about a tree that owns itself that captures our imagination?
I think there are several compelling factors. First, it taps into something deep, maybe a human desire to see nature as independent from us, from human control.
Yeah.
In a world where we often feel like we dominate nature, this story offers this charming reversal, right? A little symbol of nature's autonomy.
That's a lovely thought. The tree is a symbol of nature's independence in a human world.
And second, the story just has this unique, almost whimsical quality. The American South has such a rich tradition of colorful characters and local folklore.
Yeah.
And the tree that owns itself fits perfectly into that landscape. It's memorable. It makes Athens a bit different,
It certainly does. I can imagine telling someone about it and getting a very intrigued reaction.
Right.
But the tree's self-declared property also has a very real, tangible impact locally, doesn't it?
Oh, it absolutely does. Because the tree and its supposed 8-foot radius can't be, messed with.
Right.
It significantly affects traffic flow on Finley Street.
Right.
It's normally a 2-lane road, but it narrows down to a single lane just to get around the tree.
Oh, I can picture the bottleneck.
Yeah, it often leads to traffic congestion, especially on busy days like when there's a UGA game.
Have locals talked about this unique traffic situation? Any anecdotes?
Yes, definitely. Residents like Ellen Harris and Josie Wallace have mentioned the traffic issues. They've pointed out that navigation apps don't always register the one-lane bit, which can confuse drivers.
Ah, I can see that.
Ellen Harris even suggested that big trucks should probably just avoid the street altogether.
It's almost like the tree has its own little invisible force field dictating the rules of the road. And despite the city technically owning the right-of-way, that's still the Junior Ladies Garden Club looking after the tree, right?
That's right. Even though the city technically owns the land it stands on now, the garden club continues to maintain it. It just shows the community's ongoing connection to the story.
It really all comes back to this fascinating mix of legal reality and deeply held belief. But this story also nudges us towards bigger, more philosophical ideas, doesn't it?
Definitely.
This concept of a tree owning itself. It feels like a doorway to broader thinking.
Precisely. It touches on the whole idea of rights of nature, which is a concept gaining traction, in academic circles, philosophical discussions worldwide.
Right, I've heard about that.
It goes beyond just valuing nature for what it does for humans, like clean air or resources, the consequentialist view. It considers the inherent moral worth of nature itself, non-consequentialist value.
So it's not just about the oxygen the tree gives off, but the idea that the tree has a right to exist and flourish for its own sake. Is that the idea?
That's the core of it, yeah. And we actually see little reflections of this evolving perspective in some places, like the Swiss Federal Constitution, for example, considers the dignity of living beings, including plants.
Plant dignity.
It acknowledges an intrinsic value. While some might see it as blurring lines, it definitely signals a shift in how some societies are thinking about our relationship with the natural world.
It's fascinating to see these ideas taking root, no pun intended. And it also makes me think about the less obvious aspects of plant life itself. We're constantly learning more about how plants interact, aren't we?
Absolutely. That's where things like biocommunication research come in. Scientists are exploring how plants emit chemical signals, how they might even communicate with each other.
Really?
Yeah, revealing these complex strategies for survival, maybe even a kind of want for health and reproduction. Like, one plant detects a pest, releases chemicals, and warns its neighbors to put up their defenses.
So, even without a brain as we understand it, plants have ways of interacting and, well, striving. It almost suggests a form of agency we're only just beginning to grasp.
It certainly challenges our traditional human-centered view, doesn't it? And ultimately, the story of the tree that owns itself, even if it's not legally true, it kind of embodies this collective agreement within the Athens community.
An agreement to do what?
To value and respect nature. They've chosen, through tradition and care, to uphold this idea of self-ownership.
It's a powerful example of how a local story, a legend, can really shape our relationship with the world around us, even if it bends the rules of legal reality. So we've journeyed from a colonel's supposed act of affection to a present-day traffic jam and touched on some really profound ideas about nature's rights. What's the key takeaway here?
I think the enduring paradox is the most compelling part. A tree that owns itself, despite having zero legal basis for it, it just highlights the incredible power of stories, of community sentiment, in shaping how we relate to the natural world. This one white oak has become this potent symbol, maybe of our desire to see nature as something more than just a resource for us.
It really has. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm sort of left wondering, what does the enduring story of this one tree in Athens tell us about our human desire to define, and maybe sometimes even give up control, to nature?
That's a great question.
Could the lessons from this single white oak maybe spark broader conversations about the intrinsic value, perhaps even the rights of the natural world all around us?
That's a crucial thought to ponder, I think. And it encourages all of us, like you said at the start, to maybe look around our own communities. Are there local stories, traditions that shape how we see and interact with our environment? Perhaps this seemingly whimsical tale from